I look around at us. You know what I see? Losers. I mean, like, folks who have lost stuff. And we have, man, we have, all of us. And usually life takes more than it gives, but not today. Today it's given us something. It has given us a chance.
To do what?
To give a shit.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where this week we are continuing our exploration of the Guardians of the Galaxy. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor from Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, host, voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
And before we jump in, John, we have a question from one of our patrons.
Okay.
This is from Wayne Edwards, who asks, so why does everyone speak English in Guardians of the Galaxy? Is time measured the same way in every planet? I know this is an easy sci-fi writing trope. Star Trek does it with a universal translator. Even Star Wars explains why most species speak the same language and measure time the same on all planets. He says, Marvel science is just silly. So, John, why does everyone speak the same language and use time the same way? What do you think?
Because they wanted this film to appeal to as many people as possible, and this was very early on in the Marvel machine, and they wanted to have a hit. And spending time with subtitles and all that kind of stuff, that was not what this film was supposed to be about. So I think that's why they made everyone speak English. And you know, what is it you know about going over to other countries? They speak multiple languages, right? It's languages. Sometimes you get caught thinking about America, and really we speak maybe one, maybe two languages, each of us. Yes, there are some of you who are on the higher end who speak multiple language. Kudos to you. But most people in the educational system of America only speak English and maybe one other language, right, in their lives. Whereas in Europe, so I think when they go out into space, there is this connotation that everyone speaks multiple languages because there are multiple species and multiple planets, so they all speak different languages. And look, Quill would have had to have learned English being on there with would have had to learn different languages being there with the Ravagers. There's no way he's wooing every woman on in the galaxy with just English. So it's the common language, just like it is the common language when you go into other countries in Europe and what have you. So that's the logic I was operating from. So, you know, but I get the point.
So, first of all, if you're paying very, very close attention, when Quill is getting his mugshot and there's a bunch of little details that pop up on the screen, one of them is that he has a translator implanted in his neck. So that is the answer to the question. But the real answer, of course, is we don't have time for that shit.
Yeah.
That's what the real answer is.
Yeah.
There's a great one of the Adventures of the Screen Trade books from William Goldman, I don't remember which one, he talks about cliches, and he's like, why is it when you're watching a movie, someone turns on the news and the first story is a story that directly relates to their life, or someone needs a cab, there's a cab right there. They need a parking place, they get one right in front of their building. And the reason is because we don't want to spend 20 minutes watching Tom Cruise look for a parking place.
Yeah.
Because that's not what the movie's about, is that there are things where time and how we tell time and relativistic space and all of that science becomes critically important. If you're watching Interstellar, that's what the movie is about. And so we're going to spend time doing that. If you're watching the episode of Next Generation, Darmok, where it's all about language and trying to learn each other's language, well, that's what that's about. If you're not going to do a thing about time, or you're not going to do a thing about language, then just ignore it and get to the movie. That's what, and so it's never going to work. It's never going to make sense because we just can't service different languages and all the science and all the stuff and still give you Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not going to happen.
And I don't know any science in any franchise that's infallible. So like, to be picking Marvel out is because you've got an axe to grind against Marvel. Because honestly, all science in all the franchises are silly, including Star Trek and Star Wars and all of them, you know.
I mean, Star Trek time travel rules. I mean, time travel is ridiculous to begin with. And it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. You know, it's like you just like the film The Martian, which I love, and I love the book too. That is a hard science fiction thing where they're really trying to really explore real science. Does that mean The Martian is scientifically accurate? Oh, totally. It's not. It's way more scientifically accurate than the Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's still not, because it's still the purpose is to tell a story. That's the goal. And Wayne, thank you very much for your question. And for those of you listening, this is a great way you can join the conversation on the show is by going to patreon.com/thecine-files, where at a certain tier, you can ask questions on upcoming films. And the questions basically are universally fantastic. So thank you for everyone on patreon.com/the Cine-Files who supports the show, as well as our supporters on Apple Podcasts.
Absolutely. And if you want to support the show in a different way, because not everyone can do a Patreon contribution every month, maybe you can legitimize it if you hear some products that through the sponsors of our shows, you hear those commercials, some of those things that you can use in your life, then please make sure you patronize those products, use our code so those people, our clients there, see that we are a show they want to support because they get people like you all to buy their products and to support them there. So that's another way you can support the show. So please help us do that as well.
So where we left off, we had escaped the kiln. Our group had come together, although they're really not quite a team yet. And we're flying towards this beautifully bright-colored nebula. And this is one of the things about Guardians is James Gunn's view of how the galaxy looks is just stunning and colorful and amazing.
I can't recommend watching this movie. If you have a TV that does 4K, and I'm very fortunate to have an OLED 4K TV, from LG. And when you watch the 4K transfer off of Disney Plus, it is stunning, utterly stunning to watch. As you said, the visuals that James Gunn and the production team came up with to when we're in space to just absolutely wow you as a viewer. So yeah, you're great to point that out, Steve, for sure.
And Quill is walking through his ship and sees Rocket who has torn something apart and is putting it together. It's like, whoa.
Ranger Rick, what are you doing? You can't take apart my ship without asking me.
Now, we should say Ranger Rick is a connotation to a children's nature magazine. Steve, you and I probably are like, oh yeah, Ranger Rick, that makes all the sense in the world. But actually, there may be people who are generations younger than us, or generations younger than us who don't know what Ranger Rick is. And considering Quill left in the 80s when he was taken by the Ravagers, Ranger Rick is a connotation he would make because of that's his exposure to what he had there on Earth. And there was raccoons, there were certain wildlife that were featured on this. So him calling him Ranger Rick makes all the sense in the world because Ranger Rick was a raccoon that served as a park ranger and the leader of the deep green wood in the magazine. So yeah, I just want to throw that out there for people who maybe didn't catch that reference.
What is this?
Don't touch that. It's a bomb.
A bomb?
Yep.
And you leave it lying around?
I was gonna put it in a box.
What's a box gonna do?
And as he's looking for a box, he finds the wrapped present from Quill's mom.
Yeah.
And immediately Quill's like, don't touch that. And I think it's great because I think we kind of forgot about it. Yeah. And now we realize like, oh, it's been 20 years. Mm-hmm. He has held on to this thing and he has never opened it.
Yeah.
What is that?
That's for if things get really hardcore. Or if you want to blow up moons.
No one's blown up moons.
You just want to suck the joy out of everything.
Each of them kind of stake in their case, right? And their role in this team and their role on Quill's ship. You know, as I said, I know we'll have some battle about a short coming down the road about alphas, but each of them are alphas in different ways, in my opinion. I mean, what Rocket is doing there, that's an alpha move. I'm just going to go ahead and take things apart and put things together, leave a bomb here. Gamora saying, you're not going to be shooting moons. That's an alpha move, telling him what to do. Quill getting upset. And so I see them all staking their case or staking their claim to their territory in a way as they go on and move about the ship, so to speak.
Our only disagreement is just a semantic one. I totally agree with everything you're saying about these characters. They are all staking to certain claims. They are all following their beat work, and they're all in conflict, which is how you set up a great situation, a great dramatic situation. And where we get to is that Quill wants to know where we're going, and Gamora isn't giving him any more information because she doesn't trust him. And again, immediately we go right back into conflict.
If it's a weapon, we should use it against Ronan.
Put it down, you fool. You'll destroy us all.
Or just you, murderess!
I let you live once, princess.
I am not a princess!
Hey, nobody is killing anybody on my ship. We're stuck together until we get the money.
I have no interest in money.
Great. That means more money for the three of us.
And I love the little squeak and gesture from Groot. It's great.
So good.
And this is, you know, what's funny is I think the team coming together movie is akin to the buddy movie, you know, in the sense that, you know, the most perfect buddy setup for me is Lethal Weapon, where, you know, he doesn't want to work with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover says, God hates me. And Mel says, hate him back. Works for me. I've always loved that because that is we don't want to be together. And that's where we are with this group right now. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, we have to just stick together to get past this thing.
Right.
But we don't want to.
It's a carrot. It's a carrot on the stick. It's being held out. For them, the carrot is the money, right? So they'll deal with each other just to get to that carrot.
Right. And then over time, through conflict and mutual support, then they develop relationships. And that's how this works.
Yeah.
And then the last button on the scene is...
And Quill, your ship is filthy.
Oh, she has no idea. If I had a black light, the place would look like a Jackson Pollock painting.
So now, how does he know about black lights? And why would he even make a black light? I don't think there were people talking about black lights to a kid his age in the 1980s. So it's an interesting idea. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't remember seeing about black lights till I watched CSI. I didn't even know about black lights till then. Maybe I'm off on that. Steve, am I wrong?
Well, so I hadn't considered this. I 100% knew about black lights when I was a kid.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I didn't know about the aspect of black lights that Peter Quill is talking about when I was a kid. Because when you went to Disneyland and you were in a ride, they used black lights all the time because that's why your shirt would glow and things, and you go into that or Halloween, people had black lights. They were things that made things glow. I didn't find out that they could reveal certain bodily fluids that had been left around until watching ER in the 90s.
Okay.
That's the first time I remember hearing that.
Fair points. We just weren't rich enough to go to those places. I just didn't know about black lights until later. So yeah. All right.
But I will tell you how this came about, which is that obviously one could guess the blacklight line was a Chris Pratt improv.
Oh, that makes sense.
The Jackson Pollock line is a James Gunn idea. And they recorded it basically going, we're never going to use this. We're never going to get away with it. We can't use this. But they thought it was funny, so they filmed it anyway. And then they're going to a test screening. And they just kind of go, just for fun, we know we'll have to take it out. Let's put that blacklight line in.
Yeah.
They go to the test screening. Biggest laugh in the entire movie.
Wow.
And they look over at Feige and the Marvel executives and they're like, huh? Like, I guess we're going to have to keep that in now.
Okay. All right, fine. How would he know about Jackson Pollock? He was 8 years old when he was taken. Anyway, all right, let's move on.
Again, you know what? It's like why do they all speak English?
I guess.
At a certain point, it's like, was it funny? Well, here's the real thing is that when I had a sitcom teacher in film school, someone proposed a really funny joke, and the teacher was like, that is a really funny joke. That is the wrong kind of joke. And that will take people out of the movie or out of the sitcom. Did this take you out of the Guardians when you heard this line?
No, because I know who Jackson Pollock was. Right, exactly. Yeah.
It works. Does it make sense? Not entirely. Does it work? Yes, it does. We're back on the kiln where Nebula and Ronan are torturing people to find out where they've gone.
Yeah. This is pretty brutal. And I'm glad that they include this stuff in the film. It's really important. Once again, this is Marvel at its peak, that mixture of high stakes and also some brutality mixed in with the jokes. So I like that you're seeing segments of this because essentially by the end of this scene, Ronan is told Nebula to burn everybody to death, kill everybody essentially.
And here's the thing I was thinking about is that there is a trope in comic book stories that I really don't like, which is we have to work with the bad guy and then the bad guy becomes a good guy, and it's like, I remember watching like the WB shows like Green Arrow and stuff. And just happened all the time. It's like, oh, this week, this person's a hero. This week they're a bad guy, back and forth. Right. When there was Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Baron Zemo. And it's like, oh, now we're going to work. I hate this trope. I think for Nebula, it 100% works.
Yeah.
And the reason that it works is right from the beginning, you understand her jealousy. You understand she's not Thanos' favorite kid. We have that moment where Thanos says that Gamora is his favorite. Right. Like, so even though she's torturing people and obviously part of the bad guy, we actually still feel sympathy for her. So later on when she's going to turn, we accept it, you know?
Yeah, 100% agree with you, brother.
We're with Yondu and the broker, and first thing is that he likes this little jeweled frog creature.
I like to stick them all in a row on my control console.
I can't tell if you're joking or not.
He's being fully serious.
Which I love. And then Yondu asks about the client.
Yeah.
And at first the broker is not going to respond.
The high-end community is...
And Yondu just makes these funny noises over him.
The high-end community is
It's
a tight-knit
Here's how this came about.
Okay.
Normally, so when you shoot, you're the director, you sit in something that's called Video Village. And what that means is there's little video monitors, you've got headphones on, and on a small shoot, you're really close to the set, you know? So when I was shooting The Assistants, I was like, 20 feet away from where people were shooting with my little headphones and watching things. Right. And then in between takes, you would get up and walk over to talk to your actors. On big sets, Video Village gets farther and farther away from set. And so what ends up happening is that between takes, it might take James Gunn 5 minutes to walk to set to talk to the actor. Well, that's really too long a time. So you talk over what's called the God mic. So that, and which James Gunn really hated because he loved his actors and and I agree. You want to go up and whisper to your actors. You don't want to announce what you want them to do so the whole crew hears, or say like, John, I remember you told me that story about your first girlfriend and I want you to remember, you know what I mean? Like something personal you don't want to say to a set of 100 and 200 people.
Chris, if you could talk about your first girlfriend, that would be really good.
This is like when you lost your virginity. Remember that story you told me? Like you don't want that. You want to be able to privately talk to your actor. But he couldn't do it. And so he's talking over the God mic. And so the first thing that what he describes about this is that essentially everyone on the crew became part of the family because this was all just coming over the God mic and everyone at a certain point just accepted we're all family. That's the first thing.
Oh, wow.
In this particular scene, what's happening is that James Gunn is making the mumbling noises over the God mic for Michael Rooker to then repeat.
Oh, how funny.
So he's going over the God mic. Then Michael, he's just repeating them as they're doing it. And it's really, really funny.
All right, do it like this.
Exactly.
But it also is very similar to what you saw in Bruce Almighty, right? Like when Jim Carrey is doing the blah, 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 blah to Steve Carell, and Carell is repeating it in essence. So I think this is a bit of an acting exercise that maybe has been used.
Goes back to Meisner, like you were talking about before. Yeah.
So it's perfect. Even it's like Minnie the Moocher, hi, and you're repeating what they're saying. But it's all to kind of undercut the broker, right? Because who's coming up with all kinds of excuses. And Yondu's heard all these excuses before in different situations. So he's just ridiculing him to essentially shut him up and then bring out that arrow to come, or wand, whatever you want to call it, to come at him in between his eyes.
And when he whistles and that arrow comes up and goes right to the broker's face, this is one of the coolest weapons in the MCU.
I agree.
It's right up there with Molinar. And I mean, this is a really, really cool weapon.
What makes it cool is that he only uses it once in the movie.
Yep.
And so they build up the ferocity of this weapon, or the I don't know, was it the effectiveness of this weapon? And then when they show you how effective it is, you're like, oh, okay, now I really get it.
And we cut from there to another red woman, and she is kind of cleaning, and we hear a voice that says,
"Your people do have elbows, do they not?
We do, Master."
Then use them. I don't have to remind you what happened to the last attendant who disappointed me, do I?
And we see this other red woman behind her in a glass box.
Yeah.
Which freaks me out, and I think it's because it reminds me of the women in Enter the Dragon who are like drug addicted in like glass boxes.
Oh my God.
That always freaked me out as a kid.
I hadn't even thought about that. That's actually an interesting point, Steve. I hadn't even thought about that. By the way, this is Karina Tiven, and Karina is played by Ophelia Lovabond, who was recently the lead in the series Minx that was on HBO Max, and then I think went over to another streaming service as well. She was also in This Is England, which I thought was a fantastic series with Kenneth Branagh as Boris Johnson dealing with the COVID situation there in London. I thought it was excellent. And then has been a recurring character on numerous episodes of Elementary. So this is kind of a throwaway role. She plays a Krylorian slave here of the Collector, but clearly she went on to do a bunch of other things here. So yeah, interesting introduction. I like the look of it too, of her character.
We're back on the Milano, and Quill is climbing up into the cockpit. The view is just amazing of this brightly colored world.
It's called Nowhere.
the severed head of an ancient celestial being.
Such a cool design. And the song is Moon Age Daydream by David Bowie.
Yeah, this was the third track on the album that Bowie released this on. And it directly introduces the character of Ziggy Stardust. Following the track 5 Years, which describes an impending disaster that will result in Earth only having 5 years left, and then Soul Love afterwards, in which numerous characters deal with love before the impending disaster. So this song is all about getting you prepared for what's going to happen in the construct of the album itself, the story it's telling. It reminds me of what Daft Punk did with that album, with all those songs that are talking about out in space and the story they're telling there in that one as well.
Hundreds of years ago, the Tavan group sent workers in to mine the organic matter within the skull. Bone, brain tissue, spinal fluid, all rare resources, highly valued in black markets across the galaxy.
This is to me like a incredibly cool idea.
Yeah.
It's not necessary for the story, but it makes everything better. It's like, well, we could just be going to a planet.
Right.
But no, we're going to this totally unique place. And one of the things James Gunn did that he was most excited about when he started, even before he started writing the script, was just the galaxy. And he wrote a 19-page document on all of the locations, what their cultures were. And one of the biggest things he wanted to do was to bring color into space, which he obviously did.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I also think this is one of the gifts of being able to be a filmmaker in a world like this, Steve, because you're essentially getting paid to read all these Guardians of the Galaxy comics, go into all the different tentacles that are connected to Guardians of the Galaxy, and then bring out some of these locations from those pages or from books that are connected in this type of universe or this approach to the Marvel side of things. And Nowhere is one of them, because it appeared in Nova number 8. And that was the first appearance of Nowhere. And it is, as you said, the celestial being aspect of it all, but it is known as a makeshift port of call at the end of the universe for intergalactic travelers of all species. And its chief of security was Cosmo, who we're about to see here with the Collector in a little bit in this film. So yeah, it's an interesting place, and I love the way it's designed. I love the way it looks, because it's almost like it's almost like a makeshift work area with an outdoor mall there for people, a market rather, for people to like trade their wares. I don't know where they do that. They must do that here on Earth somewhere, right, Steve? This mixture of work location and also pop-up market, bazaar type of things you can get your goods and stuff.
Absolutely. Of course there is. And well, to me, it's like, we're rolling into the old West Town, you know?
Yeah.
This is the old mining town, and there's going to be the saloon, and there's going to be, the guy on the telegraph, and it very much fits into that stuff.
That's a great point, because he keeps saying outlaws through this whole time as well. So that brings up the Western connotations too. Yeah.
Well, I come from a planet of outlaws. Billy the Kid, Bonnie and Clyde, John Stamos.
John Stamos. Where is John Stamos an outlaw in the 1980s? Do you remember? I don't remember.
I don't remember John Stamos being an outlaw in the 1980s.
It's an odd decision to say John Stamos.
And as we're describing how dangerous a place this is, Groot grows a flower to give to a little kid.
Yeah.
The sweetness of Groot is so critical to the whole film, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I guess we're right. I guess I'm wrong. Yeah, Full House came out in 1987, so I guess he was an outlaw before Quill was taken off the planet.
Is he an outlaw in Full House?
He's not. He's Uncle Jesse. He's like he marches to his own beat, shall we say? He's the guy he's the Ted Danson from Cheers type of character in Full House.
You know? Okay, I don't think I have ever watched an episode of Full House.
There you go.
This is no respectable establishment. What do you expect us to do while we wait?
And we cut to Drax yelling at the table as he gambles over this, two creatures fighting each other.
My Lordy has won, as I wanted all things. Now let's put more of this liquid into our bodies.
That's the first thing you said that wasn't batshit crazy.
Yeah, and the creatures are the Orlani, which we saw Quill kicking on Morag or at the beginning of the film. So
we cut to like the balcony, and there is Quill and Gamora together. And this scene Gunn found incredibly difficult to shoot.
Really?
And it's one of those, and I totally get this. There's certain scenes that don't seem like they should be hard to write, but they end up being, you keep going back to them because you can't quite get them quite right.
Right.
And that's what this was for Gunn. He kept rewriting it. And finally they go on the day and they have the script and they do a run through and it's like, this isn't working. And Gunn sits down and rewrites a new version of the script, which is what they end up shooting, much shorter than what they had originally intended to do.
Wow. Okay.
It's just a negotiation tactic. Trust me, this is my specialty. Where yours is more stab. Those are my terms.
My father didn't stress diplomacy.
Thanos?
Which leads into a discussion about Thanos and how he took their homeworld and killed her parents.
Why would you risk your life for this?
And she gestures to the cassette player, to the Walkman.
My mother gave it to me. My mom liked sharing with me all the pop songs that she loved growing up. I happened to have it on me when I was... the day that she... when I left Earth.
Again, those ellipses are where all the drama is. What he doesn't, because he was about to say the day she died.
Yeah.
But he couldn't bring himself to say that.
Yeah, he's not there yet to share that with her. He's not.
Yeah. And she asks what you do with it, and he says, like, you listen or you can dance.
I do not dance.
Really? Well, on my planet, there's a legend about people like you. It's called Footloose. And in it, a great hero named Kevin Bacon. He teaches an entire city full of people with sticks up their butts that dancing, well, it's the greatest thing there is.
And this, of course, is what we come back to years later when they do the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Christmas special and they kidnap Kevin Bacon.
Which is so fun.
Yeah,
it's really fun. Yeah. So Footloose was Chris's idea. But James Gunn was friends with Kevin Bacon and got to call him up. Like Chris Pratt comes up with the idea and he got to call up Kevin Bacon and say, dude, we're putting you in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wait, we should say something, shouldn't we? For you younger people who maybe don't know what Footloose was about.
Oh, please. Yes.
Right? Like we haven't said this. Kevin Bacon plays this guy. I think it's Ren McCormick is the name of the kid.
Wow, pulled out the name.
I mean,
I couldn't have done
Schmoedown, baby. And he is, and by the way, this is also one of my favorite films. Just came out in 4K a few months ago. He is a guy from Chicago with his mom who moves into Dallas, I think, after the divorce, or into a small town. I think it's Texas after the divorce. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if it's not Texas. So there's a town there, but basically there's no dancing in this town, and they're not allowed because the preacher, John Lithgow, is who plays the preacher. His son died when they were in a car accident when they were going out of town to go dancing at a bar. And so in his mind, because he's the religious leader of the town, dancing connects to stuff that could kill you. Dancing connects to sexuality. So for all this stuff, he sees it as a negative. And his daughter, played by Laurie Singer, who at the time had been in the Fame show, falls in love with Kevin Bacon, and they kind of mount this campaign to convince John Lithgow to loosen the control. And Lithgow realizes, and listen, this is a very topical film for nowadays. Lithgow realizes that the banning of the dance now leads to more, shall we say, fervent believers in this idea of how music and rock and roll and all this can destroy a person's morality. It leads some of the more fervent members to start pulling books out of the library, to start burning books publicly at these libraries and high schools. And Lithgow is the one who realizes they've gone too far. And so that's what happens in the movie. And Bacon does an incredible job convincing them to let them dance. And by the end, there's a wonderful sequence of dancing that happens. So highly, highly recommend the movie if you guys haven't seen it.
You know, it's funny.
That movie, Steve.
Yeah. So first of all, I have not seen that movie in 30 years easily. I watched it many times, again, like many, many movies. I watched it many times back in the day. I had the soundtrack, which I listened to over and over. And it's funny too, that Footloose, like Guardians of the Galaxy, is totally a soundtrack movie.
Oh yeah.
You know, I listen to that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's funny. We just recorded a short, which is going to be released, I think, next week, which was all about musicals and how does Hollywood relate to musicals today.
Right.
And while Footloose isn't exactly a musical in the sense that people aren't singing,
right,
but it has a bunch of fantastic dance numbers.
Yes.
And you know what? Kevin Bacon can dance.
Yes, he can. Him and Travolta. Those are the top two right there.
And so Peter Quill takes those headphones, lifts them up. And I'm surprised that Gamora lets him put those headphones on her.
Yeah.
And the song that comes up is Fooled Around and Fell in Love by Elvin Bishop.
Yeah, and this is a song written, as Steve said, written and performed by a blues guitarist, Elvin Bishop, but the lead singer is Mickey Thomas. And some of you may go, Mickey Thomas, who's Mickey Thomas? Well, Mickey Thomas was the lead singer, became the lead singer of Jefferson Starship in the late 70s into the 80s. So when you hear all those songs from Starship in the 1980s, we built this city on rock and roll, nothing's going to stop us now. That's all Mickey Hart singing with Grace Slick in those songs. So that's why that voice may sound familiar when you hear this song. It peaked at number 3 on Billboard's Hot 100 in May of 1976. And in the 1990 essay, Rock and Sexuality, Simon Firth and Angela McRobbie suggested the song, quote, lyrically captured the distinction in rock music between cock rock and teeny bop. So interesting. Okay.
I think it's so perfect because thematically, Fooled Around and Fell in Love, that's what's happening here.
Yes.
And I also love that we get to do this. We take Gamora, trained assassin, master of, all sorts of violence, and we have her do the thing where you have headphones on and start yelling because you don't know how loud the music is.
The melody is pleasant.
And watching him kind of move closer and just, they don't exactly start to dance, but they're kind of moving to the music, and we can feel the kiss coming on, and we get right to the moment where they're about to kiss. And this is traditionally in movie structure, you interrupt the kiss. Right. That is a thing that's going to happen all the time in all sorts of movies. But the way it happens in this particular movie is fantastic because the moment that he gets close to kissing her, she has a knife at his throat,
right,
and has pushed him back. And he's, oh, what the hell? and again, it's because that mix of comedy coming in that's so great because she's still yelling over the headphones.
Yeah.
What the hell?
I know who you are, Peter Quill, and I am not some starry-eyed waif here to succumb to your pelvic sorcery.
Yeah, because Quill is starting to fall in love with her.
Yeah,
clearly, and she maybe is starting to have feelings for him too, which is why she allowed him to get as close as he does to her.
Yeah, she has to. I mean, she hasn't let anyone get that close to her.
Exactly, probably emotionally and physically, right?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing that happen, and the song is perfect because the lyrics of the song are, I must have been through about 1 million girls. I love them and I leave them alone. But it was when I met you, everything changed. And so clearly we've presented Quill as a womanizer, as we saw from the beginning scenes of the movie. But there's something different here. And that's why he says, like, this is not bad because he actually does have feelings for her. But he's using his old moves. And you can't use the old moves with someone who might be the one. You've got to be different in your approach.
And then this is interrupted by the sounds of fighting where they come back to the bar and there are Drax and Groot just going at it.
Those two idiots.
Jesus. And Quill gets in the way and stops it.
This vermin speaks of affairs he knows nothing about.
That is true.
He has no respect.
That is also true.
I love it.
It's all so great.
Yeah.
Keep calling me vermin, tough guy. You just want to laugh at me like everyone else.
Rocket, you're drunk, all right? No one's laughing at you.
And we go, oh.
Yeah.
It goes serious so quickly with that line.
Yep.
And Bradley Cooper and the way they animated the character, it's so good here because he says,
he thinks I'm some stupid thing. He does. Well, I didn't ask to get made. I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over and turned into some little monster.
James Gunn says this is the heart of the movie.
100%. 100%. Watching it this time, getting ready for the show, bro, I got emotional. I had to stop the movie because it's that idea of like, this was done to me. I didn't ask for this. This was done to me and it's so interesting because all of them are broken, as we said earlier in part 1, all of them are broken in different ways. And clearly Rocket revealing this, and revealing this because he's drunk, by the way. The walls are down. And so he's more sensitive to certain things that he normally would maybe like lash out and then move on from because he's heard all the jokes, he's heard all the barbs, I'm sure, in his time. So, but this time his walls are down and it actually hurts him, which is why he's responding with such a violent response with the gun, whatever that thing is aimed at Drax. And so it's a really moving moment. And as you said, Bradley Cooper's voiceover work here and the animation is just stellar, man. Stellar to get you emotionally connected to this character.
Well, this, along with probably, I would say, Thor Ragnarok, are the two funniest movies of the MCU.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But the heart of Guardians of the Galaxy is deep sadness. As you say, all of these are broken people. And so, like, what you notice on the surface is the comedy. But what makes the movie great is the sadness.
Right.
Which
is why the one person who saves them is the one who isn't.
Yep.
And that's
a great point. Yeah.
Groot, because they're all, her having her family ripped away from her, Drax, whatever, if it's the truth or not, he believes his wife and child were killed. And then obviously with Quill and Rocket, who we just hear now. Yeah.
And Quill says, Rocket, no one's calling you a monster, which is what you say.
Yeah. 100%.
And I love what Rocket comes back with. He said,
he called me vermin. She called me rodent.
And Quill called him a raccoon. We'd be like, it's like they're all that they have been calling him stuff.
Yeah.
That is what's been happening.
Let's see if you can laugh after 5 or 6 good shots to your
No. 4 billion units. Rocket. Come on, man. Hey, suck it up for one more lousy night and you're rich.
And Rocket reluctantly agrees.
Yeah.
We have traveled halfway across the quadrant, and Ronan is no closer to being dead.
And he walks out. And that is when Karina comes out, and we go into the realm of the Collector, where they have housed the largest collection of fauna, relics, and species of all manner. I know some of the things that are in this space, but I am sure that people could pull out a million Easter eggs that are in here. The best one is the dog astronaut Cosmo. This is just the best.
Yeah. Well, this is not that podcast. We're not going to go through every character that's in this thing. Yeah.
And there we meet the Collector, Benicio del Toro.
Yeah.
What amazing casting.
You don't need to tell me you don't need me to tell you who Benicio is. We've talked about Benicio. Benicio is an incredible actor, Usual Suspects, a million things. Sicario, really one of my favorite performances in that movie for sure. So the Collector is Tyler Tivan, who is one of the elders of the universe, and maybe it's Tivan. I don't know how some of you all say it, but he was close to his fellow elder, the Grand Master, who we haven't seen yet in the MCU. He came to self-awareness, according to the comics, billions of years ago on the planet Cygnus X1. I don't know if that's necessarily the backstory for this particular version of the Collector, but it is the version in the comics. He is an enormously powerful being who wielded the power primordial. And for millions of years, the Collector lived on an unknown world with his wife and child, spending his days in thought and contemplation. And then over 3 billion years ago, his wife, Matani Tivan, lost the will to live and relinquished her immortality. And the Collector realized he needed a hobby to maintain his own sanity and began collecting interesting artifacts and creatures from around the universe. And that's what you have here, as Steve pointed out, all the different Easter eggs that we see. And then, of course, at the end of the movie, in the post-credit scenes, we see Howard the Duck as part of this collection as well, which is great.
I never knew he was like a lonely widower, and that's what led to his collection. I had no idea.
Interesting. Another damaged person.
Would you like to know James Gunn's bit of direction to Benicio del Toro about who the Collector is?
Please.
He said he's an outer space Liberace.
Well, that would explain the whatever that jacket is that he's wearing for sure. Yeah.
And there's some introductions, and I love the moment that he sees Groot.
I never thought I'd meet a Groot. Sir, you must allow me to pay you now so that I may own your carcass. At the moment of your death, of course.
I am Groot.
I wish someone came along and said, hey, I want your dead body when you're dead. Like, yeah.
How much?
Yeah. Can I get a down payment? And then, of course, he calls Rocket a pet, which is just ties into everything that we just saw with him. Quill pulls out the orb and starting to step forward and then accidentally drops it, catches it, and pops up. According to James Gunn, he really dropped it. And this is just something that happened on the set. It doesn't look that way to me. It looks too perfect the way it happens to be an actual drop, but maybe it is.
Well, maybe what's his face did this to make it look that way to see if he could get it in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
And while this is happening, Drax stumbles out of the bar drunk. He sees a guy talking on, doing some communication about something. And James Gunn in the commentary track says, "That's my best friend. He's an old buddy of mine." And then again, everyone in the background is like someone James Gunn hung out with, someone he did a short film with before, some friend from college. He just wants to surround himself with his friends.
Yeah. I got to get to know this guy. I got to get on these.
You do.
I gotta get on these films, man.
And what he said was, and I totally respect that. He said, filmmaking is an extremely lonely and stressful process, and having people surrounding you on the set that you love and who care about you is important. that care about you part is a huge thing, because directing movies is a really lonely job.
Yep.
And there's a huge amount of pressure, and knowing that certain people have your back means a lot, you know?
Yeah. And it must even be 100 times more than that now that he's running DC with Peter Safran. So it must be even more of a lonely experience living in that way. Yeah.
Last time you said
You shall send a message for me.
Back to the Collector, we get the exposition dump explaining what this is. And this is, I think, critical to this whole phase of the Marvel universe, because this is the first real explanation, as far as I know, of the Infinity Stones.
Yeah, we're beginning the path here with the Power Stone here. So yeah, it's a massive stone that came to be after the universe came to be in the Big Bang and all of that. So, and we see those images there of all the difference. For those of you hardcore Marvel Comics fans, you'll see some of those images that are in the window there that he's showing to the Guardians there that are connected to things you've seen in the comics for sure. I think that's a Celestial, that first one.
I think so, yeah. And as he's describing the power of these stones and planet destroying and all these images we see, Quill says,
"There's a little pea coming out of me right now."
Which I love that line.
And then this is critical too, is that yes, it's a big exposition dump, but one of the pieces of exposition is that we see a group of people teaming up to hold the stone. And we hear,
once for a moment, a group was able to share the energy amongst themselves, but even they were quickly destroyed by it.
And while all this is going on and we're seeing the Power Stone, someone else that's looking at it is Karina. And the woman, by the way, in the glass box behind her, which I kind of think might be her sister or something, stands up.
I think she's standing up to tell her to not do it.
That's my feeling too.
Yeah, she probably knows what this is, but clearly, and it's such a funny moment because you could argue that it comes out of nowhere, but we did lay the groundwork a little bit, obviously, in the earlier scene when he says, do you know what elbows are for? Do you use your elbows? You better do that or else you're going to end up like her. And so clearly she wants to break out of this guy's control. So is this guy an evil guy or is this guy a bad guy? Clearly it seems like he's evil. The fact that she's willing to grab a Power Stone, not knowing what it's going to do to her, and then we see the ferocity of the Power Stone and what it can do, I think it's an interesting moment. But clearly they did just enough to get you to feel for her. And I think that speaks volumes to Ophelia as an actress, that she was able to give you just enough in the limited seconds of screen time that she has, that you could feel her desire for independence from this essential slavery, you know?
She seems like a slave to me. That's what seems to be set up. And so I do think, I agree with you, perfectly set up for this moment.
Karina, stand back.
I will no longer be your slave!
No! And Karina reaches out and grabs that stone, and man, all hell breaks loose. Groot grabs Rocket and runs kind of football player style out of this explosion, and the whole place just explodes. And we cut to Gamora and Quill like pulling themselves out of the rubble, and Quill goes, "What the?" Gamora shuts the orb, and they head out, followed by the dog Cosmo.
Yes,
which is awesome.
How could I think Tavon could contain whatever was within the orb?
What do you still have it for? Well, what are we gonna do? Leave it in there? I can't believe you had that in your purse.
And now they argue about what to do with it, and Gamora believes the only thing they can do is take it to Nova Corps. Those are the only people that could possibly contain it, and they cannot let Ronan get it.
What are you, some saint all of a sudden? What has the galaxy ever done for you? Why would you want to save it? Because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it.
And so Rocket still wants to find somebody to sell it to. Gamora wants to take it to the Nova Corps. Quill says, as a good leader does,
or we could give it to somebody who's not going to arrest us, who's really nice for a whole lot of money. I think it's a really good balance between both of your points of view.
You're despicable.
And then we hear ships coming, and there's a fantastic shot, low angle behind Drax with his two knives drawn as a whole fleet of ships. My feeling is you relate to this moment.
Oh my God. In so many ways and in so many situations of my life. This moment and the moment in Game of Thrones when Jon Snow pulls out the sword and
I had the same thought,
yeah, all those horses coming at him. That's absolutely my life most of the time. So yes, I absolutely relate to that. But he's so stupid. He's so dumb to call Ronan. But it's what makes Drax. You know, he's just so dumb sometimes. but from a place of wanting vengeance.
Oh no.
At last! I shall meet my foe and destroy him.
You called Ronan?
We've been trying to run for him the whole time, and you called him here?
And of course, right at this moment, if Ronan wasn't enough, there's Yondu.
Yeah, right.
He's here too.
Yes.
And they head off to these mining pods. And as Gamora, Quill, and Rocket get in these little mining pods, Ronan sends Nebula after them.
Yeah.
And we go to the confrontation between Drax and Ronan. And this is something we've done a few other times in the course of the Cine-Files. Sometimes it's hard when things are cutting back and forth to each other really quick. So I'm going to tell the whole story of Drax and Ronan, and then we'll move back to find out what's happening in the mining pods.
Sounds good.
Ronan the Accuser! You are the one who transmitted the message. You killed my wife. You killed my daughter.
And you would think that Ronan this is going to be a big confrontation. Ronan doesn't even care. He just walks away from it because Drax is so far beneath him.
Yeah.
And Drax attacks and Ronan just evades everything easily.
Like he's nothing.
Knocks him into this wall that's just dense. And Drax gets out of it and goes and attacks again. And he's just being held and beaten repeatedly by Ronan. He's just completely outmatched.
Yeah.
I don't recall killing your family. I doubt I'll remember killing you either.
And he just drags Drax and throws him into this yellow tank of liquid. It is a complete and utter defeat.
Yeah.
We're flying now in these bots. I think this whole thing is designed really, really well. They totally studied like Star Wars and Return of the Jedi in terms of flying into all the canals and layers and all that stuff.
Rocket, keep him off Gamora until she gets to the Milano. How? We've got no weaponry on these things. These pods are industrial grade. They're nearly indestructible. Not against Necroblast, they're not. That's not what I'm saying.
And that is when Rocket figures out that he's talking about using these ships themselves as weapons. Rocket loves the idea and just slams into these other ships. And you can see his love of just crazy destruction.
Yeah.
And then I love that Quill essentially using the arms on the mining pod rips open a ship, flies into a ship inside his pod and uses the controls to open fire with the ship that he's now ripped to pieces.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But Gamora can't make it to Milano. She's pretty much, in greater and greater trouble. And we hear Nebula say,
"You are a disappointment, sister. Out of all our siblings, I hated you least."
That's a really interesting statement.
Yeah. Again, just connecting, as you said earlier, connecting the dots here of the sibling rivalry, but also what we're sensing is that there's a little bit of, I'm not as good as Gamora. I want to be as good as Gamora, but also because I kind of respect her and love her. So it's like, it's a weird kind of messed up dysfunction, but it's there in that exchange too.
Nebula, please.
If Ronan gets this stone, he'll kill us all.
Not all. You will already be dead.
She opens fire, destroying Gamora's ship, who floats out into space. And Rocket is like, let's go. There's nothing we can do. And Rocket flies away, and Quill is watching as Gamora is sort of icing over. And he thinks, and then he says into his communicator,
Yondu, this is Quill. My coordinates are 227 K324.
Quill, what are you doing?
Just outside nowhere. If you're there, come get me.
And he puts on his mask, and he flies out to Gamora.
Yeah.
So the composer is Tyler Bates. And I think the music is fantastic. And one of the things he did was, even before they shot, he scored a bunch of pieces that for the mood. And so this was one where James Gunn is playing the music for this scene on set when they're filming it. And Chris Pratt says hearing that music it was hard to find exactly what is the mood.
Right.
This is really a little silent movie, and the music really, really helped him.
Don't be ridiculous. Get back into your pod.
And I love Bradley Cooper's voice performance on this line.
You can't fit two people in there. You're gonna die.
You'll die in seconds.
And you can hear in the way he delivers that line that deep down he knows Quill has already become one of his friends.
Yeah.
He cares about him.
The fact that he wanted to go back and save him. Do you know what I'm saying? Or to stop him from sacrificing himself. Yeah.
Well, and this is, Rocket is the most abrasive of these characters.
Yes.
And he has deep, deep heart and love.
I think one of the hardest things people have to understand about other people is sometimes, not always, sometimes people can be quite abrasive because they were sensitive people and they were hurt in life a lot because they believed in people or they cared for people who turned on them or betrayed them or embarrassed them or things happened and they were hurt by it, whether or an unexpected loss. And those people can sometimes be very protective because they feel so hard, and I know sometimes people have a hard time understanding who I am because I can be quite abrasive in certain moments or defensive or some people even call me a bully at times. It's not that. I'm still the fat kid that got beat up all the time. It's just that when I care about things so much that sometimes I can come off in a certain way, and usually it's not intended to damage or hurt someone. It's intended to defend myself a little bit and create space if I feel I'm being attacked. It doesn't mean I'm always right to say that or feel that way. It's just sometimes how I react, and so those things that you just kind of learn about yourself as you get older and you try to figure out and navigate those moments. You don't always succeed, but you've got those moments. And so I love that about Rocket. He's a clearly damaged guy. And as we see now watching the movie after having seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, you understand why he really cared for all the people that were there and had to watch them all die and also be experimented on and turned into this kind of freak in his mind. And so, caring about people is not easy for him. So in a way, he has to do these things to push them away and be abrasive in this way. Also, he's a smaller guy, all these things. But in certain moments, you see the care he has for the people who become his friends. And I love that about the Rocket character, because sometimes the most hard-won loyalty is the best loyalty,
This is why it wasn't planned this way, but I'm really glad that we're doing this movie now, because very much in our world today, we tend to be, if you do one thing wrong, you are among the bad people. If you think one thing we don't like, you are part of the bad people, whichever way we frame that.
Right.
And one of the most important themes of this movie is that people can do all sorts of stuff wrong and make mistakes and be sad and be angry and be violent and even commit crimes and still have redeeming qualities and still actually be good on a basic fundamental level, you know?
Yeah, agreed.
So Quill is out in space and he reaches up and takes that mask off and puts it on Gamora's face.
Yeah.
And we see the eyes light up red and we hear her take a breath and we watch Quill watching her as his face starts to freeze over, his eyes blood pours into them.
Yeah.
So James Gunn says that they talk to scientists and that if you blow all your air out, you can survive in space a while, and the Total Recall head exploding isn't realistic and all. I don't find this to be very realistic necessarily. I think it's beautifully, beautifully done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a beautiful moment, especially when it comes, just a few minutes after the bridge moment. You can see that he's really committing to her.
Yeah. And that light hits them from Yondu's ship, and now they're inside ship gasping for air, and he's kind of on top of her. And it's so funny because they don't look iced up. They don't look damaged anyway. They look perfectly great. And the reason that James Gunn gave for the fact that they don't show all the damage from being out in space was they look better this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which goes to the speaking English and the time and everything else we talked about is you should think about what's realistic, but then you also have to think about what's good for the movie.
Exactly.
What happened?
I saw you out there. I don't know what came over me, but I couldn't let you die. I found something inside of myself. Something incredibly heroic.
I love the change. And she's like,
yep.
Okay. All right.
And then
because he doesn't, he's not good with talking about his feelings either. Right. So, yeah.
I think what's so good, because Peter Quill is still a 9-year-old on some level. You know what I mean?
100%.
That's part of the secret of him.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, it was incredibly heroic. The only thing that's not heroic is describing yourself as incredibly heroic.
Yes.
And then there's Yondu and all the guns are on them. Back on the planet, Groot drags Drax out of the tank. He stretches out his long finger and drives it into Drax's lungs to essentially, and the yellow liquid shoots out.
Blasted idiot! They're all idiots!
still just got himself captured.
And then yells at Drax.
None of this ever would have happened if you didn't try to single-handedly take on a freaking army!
By the way, this day was real rough on Dave Bautista.
Oh.
So it was really cold out.
Oh, okay.
He's
Yeah.
tons of makeup on, but he's also essentially shirtless. He's not warm.
definitely.
And then they had to cover him in slimy yellow goo and drag him around. And that's how he had to do this scene.
Ugh.
And yet, emotionally, what he delivers in this next moment is so strong. He says,
You're right. I was a fool. All the anger, all the rage, was just to cover my loss.
and I love that Groot puts his hand on his shoulder.
It's very self-aware of Drax.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, and it literally is exactly what you were just saying about Rocket a minute ago.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
It's all coming from this pace of pain. And speaking of Rocket, he says,
Oh, boo-hoo, my wife and child are dead.
the reaction from Groot is just the best.
This is, those moments, and you're, Steve, as a filmmaker, you know this. The double laugh in one moment is a super hard thing to pull off, okay? So to have the reaction from Rocket, and you probably uncomfortably laughed in the theater, like, oh my God. And then to have Groot mirror your reaction with an overreaction of like, it made you laugh even more at the moment. So it was really smart comedy here to do it that way, because it lessens the impact of what Rocket said, so that Rocket can then say, everybody's lost somebody. Like, and you go, oh, you know what? The logic here is sound. Maybe not the reaction wasn't great, but the logic is sound, Yeah.
Well, Rocket is a truth teller, and truth tellers can be uncomfortable sometimes. But I agree with you. That was my note. I was like, man, he has a point.
Yep.
Everyone has lost something. Maybe being sensitive wasn't necessary at this point.
Yeah.
Come on, Groot. Ronan has the stone. The only chance we got is to get to the other side of the universe as fast as we can, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to live full lives before that whack job ever gets there.
And Groot stands up and he says,
I am Groot.
And I think at this moment, I know what he's saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
Like, I think I go, oh, because when Rocket says, save them, I'm like, yeah, I'm starting to understand Groot language,
Oh, yeah.
Because the storytelling's so good.
I am Groot.
I know they're the only friends we ever had, but there's an army of Ravagers around them, and there's only 2 of us.
So, first of all, the fact that he admits openly they're the only friends we've ever had is cool. And then the other thing that's really going on here is that the actual 2 people that are doing the most acting together are Dave Bautista and Sean Gunn, because Sean Gunn is playing Groot. There's no Groot there. I mean, there's a guy in a green suit, but he doesn't have lines other than I am Groot. And so what's really happening is that the 2 actors of Sean Gunn and Dave Bautista formed a real bond for these characters, even though the voice we later hear is from Bradley Cooper.
Right.
Because when he says there's only 2 of us, Drax gets up and says 3 and puts his hand on Groot. And I love Rocket just gets mad and starts kicking the grass. And he's like, you're making me beat up grass.
Yeah, so good.
We're on Ronan's ship. There's the image of Thanos on the wall.
The orb is in my possession, as I promised. Bring it to me. Yes, that was our agreement.
And then Ronan's going to change the deal.
Yeah.
However, now that I know it contains an Infinity Stone, I wonder what use I have for you. Boy, I would reconsider your current course.
That'd be fun to be Thanos. That'd be a fun gig,
I guess.
And Ronan opens up the orb, and we saw what happened when Karina held it. Like, it killed her right away.
Master, you cannot. Thanos is the most powerful being in the universe.
Not anymore.
And he grabs the Infinity Stone. And while he screams, and it's obviously painful, he is a powerful enough being to contain it, and he drives it into his hammer.
Yeah.
And Thanos just leaves. He doesn't care.
After Xandar, you were going to kill my father?
You dare to oppose me?
You see what he has turned me into. You kill him, I will help you destroy 1,000 planets.
It really is amazing that they redeem her, I think.
Yeah.
Quill is getting beat up by Yondu on the ship.
Yondu! Listen to me!
Ronan has something called an Infinity Stone.
I know what he's got, girl.
Then you know we must get it back. He's gonna use it to wipe out Xandar.
Ravagers don't care about this.
Yeah.
If you kill me now, you are saying goodbye to the biggest score you have ever seen.
The stone? I hope you got something better than that. Cause ain't nobody stealing from Ronan.
And he goes, we got a ringer because we have Gamora who knows all the vulnerabilities. And he does just enough to convince Yondu to whistle again and call his arrow back. And now he embraces Quill laughing. He's like,
you always did have a scrum boy. That's why I kept you on as a young age.
And then right at this moment, something hits the ship because Rocket and Drax are firing on them.
Attention, idiots. If you don't hand over our companions now, he's gonna tear your ship a new one. A very big new one.
I ain't buying it.
I'm giving you to the count of 5.
And he starts counting down.
3.
Rocket, it's me. For God's sakes, we figured it out. We're fine.
Oh, hey, Quill, what's going on?
Now we're going to have a big meeting. And this is one of those scenes where it's a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
It's a lot of coverage, which means shooting everybody's angle. They shot this scene for 11 and a half hours of footage, trying to capture everything. And part of it is that James Gunn knew this is central. This is the first scene of them being a team. It's them starting to work together. It's like really central to all their characters.
Right.
I have a plan.
You've got a plan.
Yes.
First of all, you're copying me from when I said I had a plan.
No, I'm not. People say that all the time. It's not that unique of a thing to say.
Secondly, I don't even believe you have a plan.
I have part of a plan.
What percentage of a plan do you have?
You don't get to ask questions after the nonsense you pulled on Nowhere.
Every scene's got to have conflict. So even though they're starting to come together as a team, all of that coming together is them arguing with each other.
Yes.
I just saved Quill.
We've already established that you destroying the ship that I'm on is not saving me.
When did we establish?
Like 3 seconds ago.
No, I wasn't listening. I was thinking of something else.
Again, I don't know why this is so funny, but it totally is.
What percentage?
I don't know. 12%.
12%?
That's a fake laugh.
It's real.
Totally fake.
That is the most real, authentic, hysterical laugh of my entire life because that is not a plan.
It's barely a concept.
James Gunn finished his first script and he sends it into the MCU. And he was nervous. He was like, I don't want to go too crazy. Yeah. Like, I want to really service the characters. And he was really trying to make a quote unquote Marvel movie. And they read the script and they like the script. And Joss Whedon was there because he's really part of the brain trust at this point at the MCU.
Yeah.
And they call him in for a meeting and they're like, we really like it. The structure is really there. So the thing is, we just want more James Gunn in here. And he goes, what do you mean? And they go, we hired you to be James Gunn. We want more of the silliness, more of the humor, more of that stuff. And he's like, for real? And they said, yes. And that is where so much of this comes from, is the next draft. So all these things like the laugh and all that stuff comes when he felt free to be more himself writing the script.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's normally they try to tell you to tone it
Exactly.
down. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, when we sold the second Shark documentary to ZDF in France, get on the phone call with them. You know, this is the president of the company, and it's a big meeting, and I'm ready to get the notes. You know, I'm ready to get all the things that are wrong with it. And they said like 2 minor things, and then they said, "But it's your movie, so whatever you want it to be, that's what it should be." And I was like, what? Like literally my entire career, I've never heard anyone say that to me.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
I am Groot.
So what is better than 11%? What the hell does that have to do with anything?
Thank you, Groot. Thank you.
Yeah, and just when Quill is feeling like he's confident in the situation, Groot eats a flower off his own arm.
And then we get the sincere speech from Pratt.
I look around at us. You know what I see? Losers. I mean, like, folks who have lost stuff. And we have, man, we have, all of us. And usually life takes more than it gives, but not today. Today it's given us something. It has given us a chance.
To do what?
To give a shit.
It's a great speech, and it's great in the voice of Peter Quill.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. just coming into his own as the leader of the team, at least for this movie.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love to see it. And we've been building to this moment, right? Because we've seen little moments of heroism from Peter, but he's also been a funny, sarcastic, rebellious kind of guy, so we like that we're getting the combo of both. And this moment, the movie's earned this moment because it's built up to it perfectly.
So as I said, they did lots of coverage on this scene. And here's how you generally do coverage, which is the general rule is you shoot the master first. So you get the whole scene. That's how you establish it. And then you have to decide, okay, I'm going to go in for singles and over the shoulders and close-ups and stuff. And what do I do next? And in general, in a scene like this, you shoot Chris Pratt next because he's sort of the central figure and everyone else is reacting to him. So if you shot, Rocket, which is Sean Gunn in a green suit first, that wouldn't really help everyone really set the scene. So that's what they did. They shoot the master, they shoot Chris Pratt, and then they're going around and shooting everybody else's coverage piece by piece, which essentially means you're rehearsing it over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because now you've done it. When Chris Pratt did it the first time, he had only done it 5 times.
Right.
By the time you get done, he's now done this speech 30 times, 40 times.
Right.
And he goes up, they're done shooting. They've shot a ton of coverage of this thing. And Chris Pratt goes up to James Gunn and goes, I think I could do it better because he's now had all this practice. And so even though they've already got his shot and it was good and they're done, they turn around and they set up to shoot that. That's part of why there's 11 and a half hours shooting this thing.
Wow.
And they shoot it. It's much better. And Gunn goes to Chris and goes, listen, we've got it. We're good. We're great. But I have an idea. This time, why don't you just say it as Chris Pratt? Say it like you're talking to your friends. Don't put any acting on it at all.
Right.
Just say it. And that's the take that's in the movie.
Wow. Yeah. Smart directors.
Yep. And I like, too, that he listened to his actor.
Yes.
Because the time is money on a set. Going back and turning the room again to get that shot, that costs tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, but as a director, but you also know, this is an actor who is trying to establish himself as a lead. So you want to be open to that. So credit to both of them, for him wanting to do it better, to service the film, probably service his career as well. And James allowing him to be able to do that so that he could feel comfortable, doing what he needed to do for the movie.
But Quill, stopping Ronan, it's impossible. You're asking us to die.
And I love the moment that he doesn't argue. He goes,
yeah, I guess I am.
And Gamora says,
Quill, I have lived most of my life surrounded by my enemies.
And she stands up and says,
I will be grateful to die among my friends.
And then Drax stands and says,
You are an honorable man, Quill. I will fight beside you. And in the end, see my wife and daughter again.
And then Groot stands.
I am Groot.
And all of them are now looking at Rocket.
Oh, what the hell? I don't got that long a lifespan anyway.
And he stands up on a box and says,
Now I'm standing. You all happy? We're all standing up now. Bunch of jackasses standing in a circle.
Bunch of jackasses standing in a circle is a Sean Gunn improv.
Oh, wow.
He's so important to this movie.
Yeah.
So James Gunn describes this movie as a bunch of weirdos that become a family.
Mm.
And that is exactly how he describes the cast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Well, and everything we've heard about that's what it is, you know?
Yeah.
Like him bringing in all his friends and all this love on the set and all the weirdness and them just embracing it and moving forward.
Yeah.
Now we get our planning the attack montage to the Runaways' Cherry Bomb.
Yeah, Cherry Bomb, I'm sure by now, a lot of you know Cherry Bomb, but it was the debut single of the all-female band The Runaways from their self-titled album that was released in March of 1976. This song is ranked 52nd on VH1's 100 Greatest Hard Rock Songs and peaked at number 106 in the Billboard Bubbling Under Hot 100 chart, which I've never heard before doing research for this show. But Sherry Curry sings the lead in this, and some of you may know that Joan Jett and Lita Ford, one-hit wonder Lita Ford, were members of the Runaways along with Sandy West, but it's Sherry Curry who sings this. And apparently this was written kind of like impromptu and last minute because the song that Sherry was going to audition to be the lead for the Runaways they couldn't quite get that song right, so they kind of wrote this as spur of the moment and put this thing together. And what do you know? It came out to be one of their signature songs. So yeah, and there's a great documentary on the Runaways that came out about 6 years ago about all these ladies and what they did to create this band at a time when, of course, there was a lot of misogyny towards all-female rock bands.
So I won't go into all the details of this sort of planning montage, but here's the basic deal, which is one, we cannot let Ronan get to the planet's surface because once he gets there, he touches the Infinity Stone of the planet's surface, destroys the whole planet.
Yep.
2, he's going to lock himself into his room, and that she is going to have to disable the panel in order to get there. And that once they get in there, then they will shoot him with Rocket's big giant weapon to kill him. That's what the plan is.
Yeah.
One thing about it is that we see sort of their visualization material, like the sort of graphics that is used by the Ravagers, which is this super sort of simple kind of 2D, almost cartoony graphics that we see. And that, of course, is, again, James Gunn and his team thinking about, well, what is it like? What is the technology like on a Ravager ship? And it is not super high tech compared to when we get to like the Nova Corps.
Right.
And we get all sorts of little fun little beats in the course of this montage. Like I love when Groot kind of gets all spiky. It's like his branches come out, but then he also has to pluck a flower on himself.
Yeah.
And we also hear that one of the pieces of the plan is they're going to call the Nova Corps because Quill has a buddy that he can call to get their help. And we cut to John C. Reilly. And I love like the caller ID face of Quill's that pops up when he's getting the call. It's really funny.
There's one more thing we need to complete the plan. That guy's out.
And then we are out in our ships flying ready because we're actually going to go on this attack. And then, because obviously you got to have one in the movie, we get the slow-mo team walk.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Which actually works.
It totally works. And I love all the little stuff. First we get Quill, then Gamora, then Drax, who flexes, Rocket, who adjusts something in his crotch, and then Groot joins in. It's all like really, really fun. I also love that we see Yondu's little dashboard, and and there is, the little purple the thing he got from the broker.
Yeah,
like he actually does like having little things on his dashboard. Because would you like to know the image that James Gunn had for what the Ravager ships were?
No, tell me. Yes, I would like to know.
70s muscle cars.
Oh man, that makes all the sense in the world,
doesn't it?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And so, of course, you got to have a little thing hanging from your dashboard.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember those.
This is a terrible plan.
Hey, you're the one who said you wanted to die among friends.
Cut to Nova headquarters, and they tell them about Ronan and that he's got an Infinity Stone and he's coming here, which we have a reaction to. Yeah. And we see their sort of visual technology, which is 3-dimensional and flying in space. And it's like, oh, that's the contrast between how the Nova Corps does things and how the Ravagers do.
Did he say why we should believe him?
He said his crew just escaped from prison, so we'd have no other reason to risk coming to Xandar to help.
John C. Reilly's so great in this. He says
that he's an a-hole, but he's not, and I'm quoting him here, 100% a dick.
He's an a-hole, but not 100% a dick. It's like, again, it's like, this is dialogue I could never write. I could never come up with anything remotely like this. I love it so much. It's so funny.
And Glenn Close doesn't blink an eye. I love it. She doesn't blink an eye. She just kind of goes, oh, do you trust him? That's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't know that I believe anyone's 100% a dick, man.
And the casting of John C. Reilly is so brilliant because he can deliver this in this way that nobody else can.
Yeah.
I mean, do you believe that he's here to help?
He takes a moment and then he goes, with, I think, perfect honesty and sincerity.
Yeah. He builds to it in his face, which not a lot of people can do really well without looking like they're overacting, but John C. Reilly does it so well.
He is, I think John C. Reilly is a very unique treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. 100%. He's not for everything.
Right.
But what he's for, he's really for.
Yes.
And then as we're preparing for this battle, Ronan's ship is coming into orbit. And as we said, so the Ravagers are muscle cars. Yeah. Nova Corps is high tech. Ronan's ship is like a big block of granite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like with no technology. Like, dude, we don't see any kind of high techy looking things, which in a way makes it more scary and more impressive, I think.
Yeah, it's like a carrier ship. It's like this massive thing in the sky that dwarfs everything around it. Yeah.
And the Ravager ships come in and they fire at the Dark Aster, but it's really just an explosion to hide the fact that they're going under the ship. And now we get into a big, space battle.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of chaos and firing and shooting as we have this battle in space with all of Ronan's troops coming down to fight against them. And Yondu gets hit and goes down, and we hear,
Hell! I'm going down, Quill! No more games with me, boy! I'll see you at the end of this!
Yondu's confidence in his indestructibility, I just love. You know what I mean? Like, Yondu walks around not scared of anything.
Yeah. Yeah. The rare person.
And then, just when things are going wrong, the Nova Corps ships show up.
Peter Quill, this is Denarian Sal of the Nova Corps. With a record, I advised against trusting you here.
They got my dick message!
Prove me wrong.
Yeah, I have a feeling like they recorded that, his lines, Sarah Finowitz's lines, without knowing how Pratt's lines were going to be put in there. So,
you know what? You're probably right. And I bet, too, that they might have even done this thing that we've talked about before, which is like Linorama, which is, you got a guy named Chris Pratt, is you go, all right, do one. Now do another one. Now make up another one.
Yeah.
He probably had 10 of these that were funny.
Right.
And then Peter aims straight for Ronan's ship and they crash into the ship with Drax laughing and cackling in the back as if they're like all the chaos and destruction is all around them. And the looks back to Drax are hilarious.
We all know that person, and I am certainly that person who laughs at the craziest roller coasters just impulsively and instinctively, or puts their hands up when there's turbulence on a plane, and that's essentially what Drax is.
And as they make it into the ship, destroying and killing all sorts of people as they come in, our line of triumph is,
yes!
Oh. We're just like Kevin Bacon.
And just as Gamora predicted on the bridge or wherever Ronan's space is, when they're boarded, he does shut down the doors, close the security doors, and that's just what they knew the plan would be.
Yep.
So we're going to stick with the outside stuff, and we'll come back to these guys who are now on Ronan's ship.
Sounds good.
So Rocket is now sort of in charge, I think, of what's going on outside. And the Dark Aster is pushing down towards Xandar.
All Nova pilots, interlock and form a blockade. The Dark Aster must not reach the ground.
The ships join together to create what they call the Nova Net. And it's interesting because James Gunn is a screenwriter, but he's also an artist and also thinking as a director. Right at the beginning, drawing out the storyboards for this sequence is actually one of the first things he ever did before he had even written the whole script.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of smart. You know where you're heading to.
Yeah. And I love the way it looks when all the Nova Corps ships lock together to form this shield. It's really cool. Back on the surface, Yondu picks up his blue frog because he doesn't want to lose that. And he's surrounded by Ronan's men. And it looks like they have him dead to rights. I mean, this is a whole bunch of guys all around him. It's just Yondu on the ground. And this is James Gunn's Sergio Leone sequence.
Oh, yeah, I can see that makes sense. Yeah, because there's 20 of them plus the ship that's out there looking at him. Yeah.
And he pulls back his coat just like a gunslinger, revealing the arrow. And we saw him threaten someone with it earlier. Then we saw him actually use it, but never fully use it with both the broker and Peter. Yeah. But we don't really know what this arrow can do. And this moment where he whistles and it just goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the ship, comes back to him, all the guys drop, and then the ship crashes. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I love the way this is directed because you go from close up to kind of slight slow motion to the fierceness and velocity with which that arrow can go through everyone. And then it's not like he goes right back into his holster by itself. He has to catch it because I imagine that arrow will go, and so he has to kind of make sure he has control of it. So I like that element of it, almost like he's riding a wild horse. He's got to keep the reins tight. And so he lets it run for a while, but then he has to pull it back. And clearly that's what happens with this. So I love the way it looks as well. And the way it's shot. Cause you do, and it adds a whole nother level of like, don't fuck with him.
Yeah.
Energy to Yondu. Yeah.
it must be so cool to be an actor. I would think particularly an actor like Michael Rooker, because you show up, I mean, everything is so weird. You're in this blue paint and you're in front of green screens and you're holding things and there's a guy in a green suit and everything just looks weird. And then you get to go see yourself in a movie and to be able to see yourself in this cool moment and see how it all comes together. It must be awesome.
Well, I think if you do great work, directors of new generations will discover you, right? Tarantino has proven that. And, you know, to be honest, when Gunn cast Rooker in this, I think Rooker had, from what I read, if I remember correctly, Rooker had to be convinced to be in this thing, which is ironic considering some of the other films he had been doing at the time, but he had been convinced to be in this thing. And it was James Gunn's exuberance for Rooker's acting and for his previous projects, you know, that ended up getting him in the movie. And arguably, this movie and the second movie kind of give us a whole new renaissance of Michael Rooker in a number of projects, you know, and so because he's so great in this role and he plays it so perfectly.
And the next strategy from Ronan is just to dive bomb the city, to go right after the civilians. And so now we have explosions all over the city. We have people running. We see this Krylorian red woman with her daughter running, Rocket swoops in to save them at the last possible second where they're being destroyed. Yeah. And then Rocket directs everyone to hover over the ground and shoot up. And this they called their Space Invaders sequence.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. That's a video game moment. Yeah.
Then Ronan gets involved and he pulls out his giant hammer and fires through that shield, which starts to collapse. And the commanding officer of Nova Corps, we watch him just get crushed.
Rocket! Hold on, Saul! Just...
And now let's go back and see what Quill, Gamora, Drax, and Groot are doing on the ship. So they come out of the ship into the dark and talk about how they can't see. And then Groot opens up his hands and these glowing flowers fly around.
Yeah.
And there's just this moment of beauty and wonder. And I think the giving the little kid the flower and this moment and a couple of other sweet moments are really what's setting you up for the tragedy and the sacrifice that is to come.
When did you learn to do that?
Pretty sure the answer is I am Groot.
And Drax says,
I want you all to know that I am grateful for your acceptance after my blunders. It is pleasing to once again have friends. You, Quill, are my friend.
Thanks.
And I love, so first of all, that's lovely and sincere and feels great. And then the next line.
This dump tree, he is my friend. And this green whore, she too.
Oh, you must stop.
And then there's Nebula.
Gamora, look at what you have done. You have always been weak. You stupid traitor.
We see Drax lowers his big gun and says,
nobody talks to my friends like that.
And now they're going to split up because Gamora's got to go shut off that panel to open up the door so they can get in. And we see Nebula just broken to pieces and watch her reassemble herself as she's done many times. And it's particularly the jaw popping back into place that makes it so cool. Yeah. And he has this great fight toe to toe with Kortha, and then and reaches up, grabs the technology on the top of Kortha's head and rips it out, killing him. And Jimon Hansu does a great death. And then Drax turns to Quill and slides his finger across his throat and says, finger to the throat means death. Metaphor.
So I do want to correct you, Steve. It's Korath, not Kortha. So you've been saying Kortha in this section. So if
let me just redo it because it's only a little bit. Yeah, let me just re-say that. Thank you.
That's why I wanted to stop you. Yeah.
It's Korath.
Korath, yeah.
Yeah. So Quill turns a corner and there is Korath. And much to Peter Quill's joy, he says,
Star-Lord, finally.
And they fight, but then it really becomes Drax and Korath who just go to toe. Great battle, and he reaches up and grabs the technology on the top of Korath's head, rips it off.
Finger to the throat means death.
Jimon Hansu does a great death, and then Drax says,
metaphor.
He's so satisfied with himself for getting it right.
Yeah, these little moments are hilarious. And he's like, kinda, and then walks away.
And we're going like, man, you know, Peter Quill, pretty good fighter, doing pretty well against people. Drax, awesome fighter.
Yeah.
And then like 200 bad guys show up. And Groot wipes them out, impales a ton of them, slams them up against the wall, drops them. They all drop. And then the piece de resistance is the turn back after he'd done this brutal, violent thing.
Yeah.
The turn back to Drax and Quill, and the big, goofy smile on Groot's face is amazing.
Yeah. As if to say, I got him.
Yeah. It's not the same as Puny God moment in Avengers.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But it is very satisfying.
Yeah.
So Gamora and Nebula are fighting and going toe-to-toe back and forth. And finally, Gamora kicks Nebula, who almost falls off the ship. Her hand gets caught on this metal crag and she's hanging there.
Sister, help us fight Ronan. You know he's crazy.
I know you're both crazy.
And chops her own hand off rather than let Gamora help.
That's an interesting situation that she says, I know you're both crazy. So Nebula, in the end, it's so crazy, as you said, Steve, earlier in this particular episode, the way they redeem her in this series is so great. And I never caught this line before. You know what I'm saying? And this time around, having seen the Endgame and all of that multiple times, because it's been a while since I've seen this film, to have her say, you're both crazy. She's essentially saying, I've been in the middle between the two of you, and I've taken the abuse from you, and I've taken the abuse from him. And you're both crazy in different ways, but you're both crazy, and you both think you're right. And I think that's that one line. I think there's a lot of character work being done in that one line, and she willingly sacrifices her hand to fall all the way down onto that ship to take off on that and throw the pilot out. But she's essentially saying, if I go with you or go with him, it's the same thing to me because of what I've experienced from both of you. And of course, we find out later that it's because Gamora has constantly beat her in one-on-one contests in order to curry favor with Thanos and also not to be punished by him. So she's endured a lot of abuse in an indirect way from Gamora, but it's all, of course, fed back to Thanos. And clearly, as we saw earlier, she wanted to have Thanos killed and was willing to kill multiple planets with Ronan in order to get out of being enslaved to her father. But even with the chance to go with Gamora, she does not go with it because Gamora is just as bad as her father in a different way. So it's a fascinating line. I may be reading too much into it, but that's what I take from it.
Well, if you were reading too much into it, you're not going to, I'm taking it to the next spot because I hadn't thought about it until you were saying it, but I think you're totally right. And B, and I don't want to make this too heavy. I mean, this is not a heavy movie, even though there's a lot of sadness in it, but it's as you were talking, I'm well, this is an abusive relationship. And Gamora and Nebula are the children of an abusive parent.
Yes.
Who has pitted them against each other. And in codependent and abusive relationships, the children, like the children of an alcoholic or something, they take different tactics on how to survive.
Yeah.
And frequently the person who decides if one of the kids goes, I need to stand up to the abuser, the other kids will fight that kid. What are you doing? You're making things worse. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of, and it's if Gamora beat up Nebula, that's not Gamora being an abusive sister. That's Thanos being an abusive father. He's still the creator of the abuse. But for Nebula, it doesn't feel that way.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And Gamora is trying to leave. And that also happens, right, in these abusive relationships with multiple children. One child decides to leave, usually the oldest, because they can't take it anymore, and they leave the other children behind and the other siblings behind. And those siblings develop a healthy amount of anger towards that sibling for leaving because you were our buffer, and when you left, our father got worse, or our mother got worse. And so there's that element of that too, because that's essentially what Gamora is trying to do, is to break away from Thanos however she can.
Well, there's that weird scientific theory, not theory, I mean, it's apparently very well researched, called homeostasis, which is if you have a chaotic environment, that environment is what you're used to. And if the source of the chaos leaves, someone else has to create the chaos to keep things the same, so someone else will take over the abuse or take over the violence if the source of it's not there,
Yeah, but hopefully that also, when the source leaves, shatters the chaos.
What we hope, yeah.
At least I hope so. if you know what I mean. Anyway, let's keep going.
John, the plan has worked. We've disabled that panel. The doors have opened. We've come into where Ronan is, who turns around, and there is Quill with Rocket's crazy weapon. He aims it at Ronan, fires, hits him, knocks him down.
You did it!
They have won. And then Ronan stands up. And he takes them out with his hammer, blasts them all down. Drax gets up, charges him, does no better than he did before. The only difference is this time Ronan says,
I was mistaken. I do remember your family. Their screams were pitiful.
And just as he's about to kill Drax, Rocket in the Milano comes crashing, screaming into the ship and knocks Ronan down. And now the Dark Aster is crashing and it's heading down. We have seen no sign of Ronan. Everyone is hurt because of Rocket's crash. Groot looks around. Quill pulls Rocket out of the ship. Gamora drags Drax, who's unconscious, over to them. Everything is falling around them. It is very clear they are in deep trouble on a giant ship that is out of control and going to crash land.
Yeah. And
Groot looks around. And this moment, I could never have predicted what was about to happen. Mm-hmm. It is a moment. This is perfection of plants and payoffs, in my opinion, because it is a moment.
Hey, plants. Hey.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Pun not intended, but yes, this is the perfect plant and payoff because we haven't thought about it at all, but everything's been set up to bring us to this moment, which is Groot looks around. But again, they had actually written the music for this ahead of time, so they're playing this on set. Nice. Apparently, Zoe Saldaña was really moved in this scene, despite the fact that she's playing it with a dude in a green suit, Yeah. And Groot looks around, reaches out with his arms, which begin to sprout, and Rocket looks up, and it's all handled very slowly as the branches start to spread and the twigs spread, and they almost embrace each of the Guardians of the Galaxy and pull them in like a seatbelt, to keep them safe. And this cocoon starts to grow around them. And I think we have this, as we're watching, a dawning realization of what Groot's doing.
So let me tell you what I see here. And of course, I'll probably get accused of overthinking, as some people do. But just because you guys don't see it the way I do doesn't mean I'm wrong, And I need to do a better job of stating that sometimes, because people like to ridicule my takes, but I believe in the things I say. And I think in this moment is really, there's a lot going on here. First of all, choosing Groot to be the one who essentially sacrifices himself to save the Guardians, which is what we're headed towards in a few seconds, I think is a perfect decision. Why? Because Groot's been not an afterthought, but he's been a person who is not necessarily leading the team at any moment, right?
Right.
He's very much his own person. And there are, and we're not to rehash it, but there are alpha moments, like when he's killing those people, like you just brought up earlier, like no one told him to do it. He did it and wanted to kill all those people, and then looked back like for approval almost. And it's a sweet moment. But he's also been the one that everyone has a feeling, like a connection to and an affection for, and no one has a crossword with Groot throughout the whole movie. So for us as an audience, we're immediately in love with him, immediately in love with the character. We love the design of the character. So when it's him who is creating, in essence, another container, another orb to hold a stone, and the stone is their power of friendship, their power of love for each other, he is protecting that by creating another orb to keep that stone safe. And that's what I see. Now, I don't know if James Gunn was thinking, I don't know if they were intentional. That's what I'm seeing, is that because it's a circular orb what he creates to protect them. And it is the power of their friendship, which is another, in essence, a symbolic of the Power Stone that they have to preserve as well. And so I think it's a good thing what he's doing. And the sacrifice wouldn't have been as powerful if it was any other Guardian of the Galaxy. It wouldn't have been. To have Groot do it has been just this fun, innocent a character who people love, and not innocent in that he hasn't killed people, but innocent in the energy. I thought was beautiful. Plus the idea of nature versus technology. There's a lot that goes on in this moment that I think is has a lot of allusions to certain things, and I think is beautiful to see. And it is devastating. And we had someone, I'm not going to name any names, but we had someone post on our Facebook page who was upset that we were doing this movie. And these moments are why we do certain Marvel movies, because there is emotion, there is character development, there is character work, there is great writing that rivals anything you'll see in most of the great movies, in certain Marvel movies. And I always think they get a bad rap. Some of these Marvel movies get a bad rap because there is genuine emotion happening for these characters, genuine performances being done by these actors, and the direction and the writing and the music, Tyler Bates' music, all bring you into this moment so that we as an audience are emotional watching this moment like we would be watching the Billy's death in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or any other death that you see, or any sacrifice that you see in the French Connection, or not French, sorry, in Side Adventure, when Gene Hackman is sacrificing himself. These little moments, they're connected to what you're doing here in this film, because you've built a great film to lead to this beautiful moment of sacrifice from Groot. And it is heartbreaking, it is devastating, and it is beautiful as well, which is what makes it such a great moment in film. You know?
I hadn't thought about it until you were speaking, but I remember when we did the Avengers, and what they said is that the critical moment for the team to come together is the death of Coulson, that it's Coulson's sacrifice, and all of them feeling towards him these positive emotions that is what finally makes the Avengers become the Avengers. Right. And I think that's a really good moment in a movie. For me, it pales in comparison to this moment with Groot.
Yeah, I agree, because that's manufactured, right?
Yeah, well, and it's sort of like he dies. He doesn't die sacrificing himself for them. I mean, he kind of does in a way. But, you know, Loki kills him. Whereas this is the most loved character is doing this thing, and it happens really slowly, where it is a very, very clear choice that he is like, I'm going to sacrifice my life for, I would say, not just my friends, but for my family.
Yeah.
And the moment that Rocket realizes...
No, Groot! You can't. You'll die. Why are you doing this? Why?
And that single little tendril comes over and comforts Rocket. And it's like, you know how I know that this is a great movie? Because I'm getting emotional just describing it. Yeah. Like, it is hard for me to describe it without tears, because it is so emotional. And he asked the question why, and this is... it's clever writing, but it is great writing. The only things we've heard him say are I and am and Groot, as Rocket says, exclusively in that order.
Yes.
And now, when Rocket asks him why he will sacrifice his life, he says,
"We are Groot."
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful, man.
I remember seeing this in the movie theater and not only did I cry, but my jaw kind of dropped open of like, oh my God, I can't believe. You know what I would compare it to is like in Hamilton, you're hearing I'm not throwing away my shot through the whole musical. And it is a symbol of him not his ambition and his aggression, and that he's going to always go for it. He's not throwing away his shot. And then in the final duel, he throws away his shot and fires in the air. And it never, I knew the story of the duel, and I watched the whole thing hearing I'm not throwing away my shot. And it never occurred to me till we got to the duel that he was about to throw away his shot. I think this is that level of setup and payoff.
Ooh, that's a good connection. I like that.
It's just an amazing filmic moment as he holds them in his embrace. And then we just go to white. And the ship has crashed onto the planet, and there's just this moment of just struggle and recovery in the wreckage, and we hear very distantly the 5 stair steps and Ooh Child.
Ooh Child, this is one of my personal favorite songs from the first moment I heard it, and it's one I love so much, and I was so surprised to see it used here, yet it's perfectly used by them. This is a 1970 single written by Stan Vincent, which was recorded by the Chicago soul family group, the 5 Stair Steps. It rose as high as number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1970. It peaked at number 14 on the U.S. Billboard R&B. I think because it entered a little bit later than it did on the pop chart, so that's what happened with that. But Billboard ranked this song as the number 21 song of 1970. That's a pretty good, for 1970, that's a pretty good ranking for a song like this. And it still endures, Steve. Every time, I never turn the channel when this song comes on. I love it so much. And I think it's a perfect song right here because we're dealing with the devastation of everything that's happened. It looks like Ronan is dead, possibly. They've survived the attack. And the song is essentially saying things are going to get better. You know, things, and this is coming out of what's going on in the streets in the late 1960s in Vietnam. This is a song that comes out in 1970. I think it's speaking to the public there, saying, you know, ooh, child, things are going to get better. We're going to get better. We're going to put things back together. We're going to survive these terrible times that are going on. And so I think it's a perfect song to play at this moment.
And there's just wreckage everywhere. Everyone's on the ground, struggling, obviously injured. Groot is gone. And of course, the saddest shot is Rocket with little twigs holding onto them, saying,
I called him an idiot.
You know, Ronan appears doing some bad guy speeches towards all the Xandarian citizens who have surrounded us. And Rocket yells, "You killed Groot," and charges him and gets knocked away like he was nothing by a purple blast. By the way, some people say that Rocket charged him just out of anger and rage, and other people say that he charged him so he could get knocked back to where the technology was they had to work on to recreate the bomb.
Why not just run over there? But okay, yeah, I can see
I'm just saying what the people say.
What the people? All right, fair enough.
And Ronan says,
"You're guardians of the galaxy. What fruit have they wrought?"
And we see Rocket building something, and we see Ronan building up to his big conclusion where he's going to destroy the planet, and he lifts up his hammer and says,
"Your salvation is at hand. Isalka! Yeah!"
And the big Marvel musical, cinematic, violent build cuts completely out to just have Chris Pratt singing,
Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will get brighter.
Thank God, because Ronan, I mean, no offense to Lee Pace, who I think is a damn good actor, but this Ronan is so tough sometimes in the movie. I don't know what happened here, because this final speech, he borders on sounding like Sam the Eagle from the Muppets. Like it really kind of undercuts how dangerous he could have really been. You know what I'm saying? So to me, when it moves to Peter Quill doing what he's doing, it's weird. It's odd. I know some people hate it. I've seen some reviews of the film that say they hate this moment, but thank God it happens to kind of stop this terrible villain speech that Lee Pace is delivering here.
You know, I was thinking about it because we have been a little critical of Lee Pace, and I think he deserves the criticism because it is the most sort of scene-chewing, I am evil sort of villain.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. But you know what? I'm always reluctant to blame actors, and you know what I blame too is the costume and the setup. I think it would be really hard to be nuanced and interesting in that outfit. You know, that outfit is saying you are evil. Point. You know what I mean? Yes. By the way, so this is one of those moments where you read it in a script and you go, okay, this is funny. Is this going to work? I mean, are we really going to end our giant epic Marvel movie with this moment? Yeah. And I think it's all Chris Pratt, you know, is that Chris Pratt pulls off this impossible thing, which is just singing and dancing in front of Ronan right before the world is going to be destroyed. And he says,
think about all the other actors that we had mentioned earlier. I think in the first part who were in contention to play it. I don't think anybody could have played this moment as effectively as Chris Pratt does.
No, because you have to be a silly person, frankly. Yes. You have to. It was so funny. Like I listened to an interview with Will Ferrell, and one of the things he was saying, he just has no, if it means making him look ridiculous and he can get a laugh out of it, he has no embarrassment. It's not even that he has no embarrassment. Right. It's that he's like, yes, let's make it more ridiculous and embarrassing. That's what I want. I think Chris Pratt is similar, you know?
Yeah. Those are the best comics or comedic performers, is the ones who don't care about how they look. They care about, does it serve the piece to be funny? And I love those performers. Those are usually my favorites.
I love the look from Gamora of like, what are you doing?
Now bring it down hard. Someday, put it together.
What are you doing?
Dance off, bro. Me and you. Come on.
And he holds his hand out to her, and she totally shakes it off.
Yeah.
And he goes, settle, take it back. It goes into some other moves. I mean, me describing it is silly because, you know, you got to be there. You have to watch this.
Exactly.
What are you doing?
I'm distracting you, you big turd blossom.
Which is hilarious anyway. And then Ronan turns around and sees there is Rocket and Drax holding that weapon, and he fires. And this time, instead of firing to hit Ronan, it fires at the stone in the center of the hammer, which explodes. And that Infinity Stone is floating in the air, and Quill is lunging for it, and Ronan is lunging for it. Quill just ahead, and then he grabs it. And of course, we know what's going to happen, and Quill is a human, he's going to die doing this. And everything goes purple. I think the way they do the effects, the color, the way that's shot, I think all of this is amazing.
I agree, 100%. It's so scary to look at. Yeah, just skin's peeling off them and all that. Yeah.
And some of this, by the way, is shot on a Phantom camera, which is capable of having a super high frame rate, so you get super, super, super slow motion, which is what we're seeing as Quill is sort of frozen and the purple smoke is everywhere and the purple light is lighting up on him. And Ronan looks at him and just smiles because Ronan knows, well, this guy's just going to die. And then I'll get the stone anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we hear,
take my hand, Peter.
And we turn, and again, just like We Are Groot, this is an unbelievable plant and payoff. Because we've forgotten about Mom at this point, and that he wouldn't take, it was so long ago, he wouldn't take her hand. But Peter hasn't forgotten about Mom.
Oh.
And now in this moment, he turns and there is his mom. And now all that purple's gone away and he looks like himself. And I wrote down, this is amazing and perfect and unexpected,
Yeah.
And we go,
I burst into tears watching it for the film or for our show from this moment. And I was just like, oh my God, what a perfect closure for him, because this is the thing that's been haunting him for years, Beautiful.
And he cries and he reaches out his hand, and then we see that he's also reaching for Gamora. And again, the way this is designed, because we're in sort of the more gold color where Mom is, and we've left the purple color. And then as he's reaching for now Gamora's hand, wind kind of blows across them, taking them back into the purple world, and they grab hands, and now Gamora screams, and you can feel it's done perfectly that she has taken a percentage of the pain, of the struggle, of the energy of the Infinity Stone.
Yep.
And then we see Drax behind them fighting through all the purple craziness, and he puts his hand on his shoulder, and then he screams. And now the three of them are sharing it, man. When that camera pans down to Drax's giant finger and those little rocket paws reach up to grab the finger, it is so amazingly perfect. I think it's perfect. I really do.
We've said this a number of times throughout both episodes of the show, of this particular movie. This is the moment they become the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
They're sharing the pain. They're sharing the pain together. They're willingly sharing the pain together. And that's the moment they truly come together fully as a team.
And that moment when Rocket grabs, the music changes, and now they're all standing proud and tall and staring at Ronan as a unified force. And he says,
"You're mortal. How?"
You said it yourself, bitch. We're the Guardians of the Galaxy. The bitch. I know. I mean, it's got to be some like Jesse from Breaking Bad, but it's just such a perfect to talk. Good. Yeah, and you know what? You don't have to say. So we've given Ronan a hard time for being just like full on villain.
Yeah.
The contrast between full on villain and someone that would say to that kind of villain, we're you said yourself, bitch, we're the Guardians of the Galaxy. That does make it funnier. So maybe that's part of why they took Ronan in that direction.
Yeah. Great points. Great point, man.
And Quill opens his hand and purple light shoots out, hits Ronan, who is lifted up and explodes. And then Gamora quickly puts that orb back into its little ball, and everything comes crashing down. And of course, right in that moment, there is Yondu.
Well. Quite the light show. Ain't this sweet? But you got some business to attend to before all the nookie starts.
And Gamora's trying to talk him out of it. And he tries to talk Yondu out of it. He says,
I may be as pretty as an angel, but I sure as hell ain't one. Hand it over, son.
I'm sure when Michael Rooker looked at that line in the script, he was like, I can do this one. And Quill reaches behind him, pulls out the orb in its case, hands it to Yondu, who laughs, and he does tell him,
Do not open that orb. You know that, right? You've seen what it does to people.
Here's an interesting thing. James Gunn believes that Yondu knew that Peter had switched it and hadn't given him the Infinity Stone at this moment. Yep.
That's interesting. Okay.
And I could see it either way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't agree, but of course, James directed the movie, so okay.
He's gonna be so pissed when he realizes I switched out the orb on him.
And I love the Gamora smile. Like, of course he did. Of course he did. Yeah.
And then, if we're just gonna make Steve cry again, Rocket is sitting crying with the twig.
Yeah.
Big, huge, imposing Drax, who had huge conflicts with Rocket earlier, sits down next to him. And man, he reaches up and tentatively pats his head.
Yeah.
And Rocket's first reaction is, who's touching me? How dare you? Like, what is anger? And then he settles into it and takes it. You know?
Like I said earlier, he bristles at anybody getting close to him because he's been hurt. And so the first reaction he has to someone touching him, as you said, Steve, it's to react to anger almost, or to be ready to fight. But then he lets it go because he's now accepting that they're family as well, that they're friends, and that Drax is coming from a place of trying to comfort him. So he's allowing it to happen, which is great.
It's later on in Nova headquarters, and we're hearing that Quill is only half Terran.
Your mother was of Earth. Your father, well, he's something very ancient we've never seen here before.
That could be why you were able to hold a stone for as long as you did.
And again, we're not putting anything on it. We're going to have to wait for the sequel for all of that. Everyone else shows up, and John C. Reilly gestures for them to come with them. And Gamora is walking with Drax and tells him,
Your wife and child shall rest well, knowing that you have avenged them.
Yes. Of course, Ronan was only a puppet. It's really Thanos I need to kill.
Gamora just looks and like, oh, God.
Oh, my God.
And then we step outside, and there is the Milano.
We tried to keep it as close to the original as possible. Salvaged as much as we could.
Wow. Thank you.
And John C. Reilly, in total sincerity, says,
I have a family. They're alive because of you.
By the way, super hard. This was shot on a rooftop in London. And that day, the sun was shining, and then it got cloudy, and then the sun was out, and then it was cloudy, and the bells from all the churches were ringing, and they just had to stop and start shots over and over and over again, just trying to get this little final bit done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We hear that the criminal records have been expunged, but they shouldn't break laws in the future, at which point Rocket says,
Question. What if I see something that I want to take and it belongs to someone else?
You will be arrested.
But what if I want it more than the person who has it?
Still illegal.
That doesn't follow. No, I want it more, sir. You understand? What are you laughing at?
It's the sir, I think, that makes that line really funny.
Yeah.
And then it's almost as if Drax understands the game they're playing, because he says,
What if someone does something irksome and I decide to remove his spine?
I like John C. Reilly just like basically treading water, trying to figure out how to answer this question. It's like,
they'll be fine, Day. I'm gonna keep an eye on them.
You?
Yeah. Me.
We're on the ship. He opens up that drawer. There's that wrap package. And this is all perfect.
I know these last few months have been hard for you. But I'm going to a better place. And I will be okay. And I will always be with you. You are the light of my life. My precious son. My little Star-Lord.
The fact that the name Star-Lord is because that's what Mom called her.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Right? So cool.
And he opens the box, and there is Awesome Mixtape Volume 2, puts the tape in, and we get Ain't No Mountain High Enough from Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell.
Yeah, one of my favorite duets. You know, Marvin Gaye did a number of great duets with Tammy Terrell and other fantastic singers. This song is actually written by Ashford and Simpson.
Oh,
if people remember this. Yeah, Ashford and Simpson, who were went on as a duo act in the 1980s. Their big song being Solid as a Rock. That was a great song, but they wrote so many incredible songs here for Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, and for others here as well. The song became, this was a song that was massive for them. It was nominated for Best Pop Vocal Performance there at the Grammys. And Ashford and Simpson have written a number of songs for Ronnie Milsap, for the Shirelles, for the Guess Who, for Ray Charles. So songs like You're All I Need to Get By, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand, and even Shaka Khan's I'm Every Woman from 1978. Ashford and Simpson wrote that. So Ain't No Mountain High Enough, which was in 1966. That's a heck of a song that still endures now. What, like 60 years, almost 60 years later, people still hear it because of that opening that's so perfect for that song. And I like this too as a kind of, again, as a message for the Guardians as they're going off now as a team. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, basically saying, ain't anything I won't get over to try to get to you to help you. Ain't nothing I won't overcome to try to help you. So it's a very positive message to end with them as well.
Which makes perfect sense because then we're going to see Gamora and they smile at each other. And it's not exactly that they're dancing.
Right.
But they're real close to it.
Yeah.
Cut to Yondu's ship where he's looking at the orb and he's thinking about the orb. And then he finally decides to open up the orb and there is the troll inside. And Yondu gives a big smile.
Yeah.
We also see that John C. Reilly, that Krillarian woman and her daughter, that's his family.
Yeah, that
was saved by Rocket. Yep. We're all in the cockpit there, and we see in a pot baby Groot for the first time, who does the cutest little yawn and stretch. And the look of love from Rocket towards baby Groot is just awesome.
Yeah, agreed.
So what should we do next? Something good? Something bad? Bit of both?
We'll follow your lead, Star-Lord.
Bit of both.
And they fly off to, I mean, we've had nothing but fantastic songs this entire time. And man, ending with I Want You Back by the Jackson 5, it is perfect.
And this was the first national single by the Jackson 5. So it was released in 1969 by Motown, became the first number one hit for the band. And they had 5 straight number one hits starting in 1970 with this song. And it was also number one on the Soul Singles chart for 4 weeks and held the number one position on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart for the week ending of January 31st, 1970. And it's such a great song. And it also, of course, it again, another message song, I Want You Back, essentially saying I want Groot back, because the song is about someone ending the relationship too soon. And so for us, the death of Groot was too soon. So we want another Groot back. And that's essentially what's bubbling up here. And Steve, you were right. I thought it was Groot Reborn, but it actually is another Groot. I did research on this in between episode 1 and episode 2. So I have to admit that you were right on this one.
I was just certain that this was just Groot who's going to start over. And then I had seen some geeky thing with James Gunn saying, yeah, this is not, that Groot died, that he died sacrificing his life. And this is some offspring of his.
Yep.
And we see, the Guardians of the Galaxy will return. And then it was supposed to be credits. And then this next sequence was actually supposed to be after the credits. But it was so good and it was so funny that they went, people are going to walk out and we want everyone to see this. So they move this up before and we see, we're still listening to Jackson 5, I Want You Back. And we see Drax sharpen his knife and Groot frozen and completely still in the foreground in the pot. And as soon as Drax walks around, he goes into the cutest dance.
Yeah.
And that dance is James Gunn. That was him motion capturing the dance. And then Drax starts to sense that something's going on, looks over, Groot freezes, goes back to his knife. Groot goes back to dancing. And on that last I Want You Back, now we go to the credits. And then they had to come up with an end credit scene because it was going to be the Groot dancing thing. And so that's how they came up with Back with the Collector. And there is Howard the Duck, voiced by Seth Green.
Yeah. And Howard the Duck is a fictional character that appeared in Marvel Comics way back when. The character was created by Steve Gerber and based very loosely on his college friend, Howard Tuchman, and artist Val Maverick worked on this one and Howard the Duck as well. First appeared in Adventure into Fear, number 19 in December of 1973, and was featured in multiple comics, getting involved in misadventures. And the most common tagline of his comics read, "Trapped in a world he never made, Howard the Duck." There you go.
I never read I think I have one, maybe I have one Howard the Duck comic. And I remember, I still remember when the movie came out that was George Lucas. And it was, this is peak Lucas. It was right after Jedi, I think. And we're like, oh my God, what's it going to be? And I still remember going to see the theater. And even then I was like, no, this isn't this is not good.
Yeah, it was horrific. Yeah.
So post-production, there were 2,750 VFX shots in this movie.
Wow.
That is so much. That's basically almost every shot, because anytime you have Rocket, anytime you have Groot, anytime you have any of these science fiction backgrounds, like there's always visual effects. This is also where this is the point at which the Marvel marketing machine is really on full. You know, there are comic ties in, there are appearances on Kimmel, there's references in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there are viral marketing campaigns, fictional travel websites, sneak peeks at Disneyland and Hollywood studios, and there's merch everywhere building to this thing. I already mentioned that the WGA gave joint screenwriting credit to Nicole Perman, who wrote the first script, and James Gunn. James Gunn not happy about that. It was released on July 14th, 2024. Box office of $773 million, third highest grossing film of the year. The only thing it was nominated for was for makeup and visual effects, but it didn't win either of those. By the way, just so you know, and I think it's on Disney too, so you can see it. It has one of the most fun outtake blooper reels.
Oh yeah,
of the Marvel movies. Very, very fun.
Yeah.
And I am going to put this movie into this strange category that I have invented. I believe this is 100% one of the great movies that ruined Hollywood. I think, and this is what I mean by that. So as always, the movies that are in this category are Jaws and Die Hard and The Silence of the Lambs and all sorts of my favorite movies, which is where Hollywood did something amazing. And then that led them on a path where a lot of movies are not so good. And the reason I think that is that this is the movie more than any other that I think told Marvel they can do anything. Because it's taking characters that nobody cares about, and it's a huge, huge success. And they go, sure, so we could do Eternals, we could do anything we want. And just because we're so great, and I think the arrogance that came from this success leads Marvel to a lot of the mistakes that they make down the line of whatever we can do, we're going to pull it out and it's going to be great. And it's not going to be great. They got really lucky and they had really talented people making this. And that's why this is a great movie. And that's why I put it into great movies that ruined Hollywood. You're processing.
I'm processing. I don't know if I 100% agree because I think Iron Man wasn't, that well known. And so the fact that they not, I think Iron Man's
also on my list of great movies that ruined Hollywood.
So I would say Iron Man gave him the guts to do this, right? But I think more so, and I might adjust, although I, respect and totally where you want to put it. I think I just would adjust a little bit and say that this or maybe add on to what you said, that this formula that they perfected in this movie, they've been trying to chase this white dragon ever since with every one of their movies. That combination of humor with high stakes, and with Iron Man, it was jokes through Robert Downey Jr. and little quips. This is much more comedic scenes, and I think they've been trying to find this magic mix every time. And Thor Ragnarok is the only other film, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, yourself, that comes close to being on this level in terms of the mixture of humor-filled scenes and high stakes throughout the whole movie. So yeah, I think there's definitely validity to what you're saying in a number of arenas.
By the way, you want to know one person who thinks that this is the greatest MC movie ever made?
Who's that?
Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, how nice of him.
His number one movie is one that he is not in, which surprises me.
But
we have one more question.
His sense of humor, which makes sense. So,
totally. Yeah. We have one more question from one of our patrons, Adam McAllister, who asks, what director would you like to see continue on with Guardians of the Galaxy after the departure of James Gunn?
Well, we're not going to continue with the same characters. So I think that's the element they have to factor into this. Jesus, who's a great comedian? I mean, we don't have a lot of comedies nowadays, Steve. So this is a real tough thing to kind of look at. I mean, Taika Waititi would be the natural choice if he hadn't fumbled the ball. Right?
Exactly. That was my first instinct too.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what my answer is, which is a strange one, which is the Russo brothers. And the reason is not because of what they did in, Winter Soldier and all those movies, but because they did Community.
Yes.
And Community is wacky characters, all sorts of problems who have arguments and go on strange adventures. And there's a weird, peculiar silliness to Community that I actually think would match up with Guardians. So they haven't done straight up comedy since doing Community,
Right. I would throw maybe 3 names in there. What about Jordan Peele?
Sure. I'd love
that would be interesting because he could probably slide a little bit more into the horror aspect and mix in the comedy. Edgar Wright is a real
Sure,
possibility,
absolutely, yeah.
kind of repairing that bridge a little bit, so to speak. And Rian Johnson could be interesting because of Knives Out, right? Knives Out has some good comedy mixed in with some real stakes in the pursuit of the overall goal of what they're trying to do. And I don't know, maybe Martin McDonagh, if you want to mess around with like Banshees of Inisherin and with that dark comedy mixed in with the real stakes in the movie. Yeah. Yeah.
Going to the Banshees of Inisherin place. That's a whole other place. But I like all those picks.
Yeah.
John, what are your final thoughts on the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, my final thoughts are this. This is a beautiful movie. Just a beautiful movie to reacquaint yourself with, to connect again with. And, you know, from my own personal experience, a lot's been going on for me over the last few weeks. And so to have a movie like this to watch again and to talk about with Steve and to hear from some of you all who've been responding to our first part of our discussion means so much. You know, these are the movies that we need in our lives so desperately, movies that give us hope about coming together, people from different walks of life coming together to fight something evil and something that's trying to control the world and destroy our world. I love that element here, and the power of friendship and the power of family and the power of like letting go of your own issues, your own fears, and opening your heart up to accept people who are different than you so that you can come together and form a stronger unit together than you would separately. All of that is throughout the movie, along with some great humor, some great action, and as Steve pointed out earlier, some phenomenal visual effects of space. I mean, this is the most beautiful film I've ever seen that shows us space. Maybe Endgame is the only other film that can compete with the look, and I imagine they were influenced by what James Gunn did in this movie to make sure space in Endgame looked as incredible as it did. So there's so much here. Plus, it's the announcement of Chris Pratt as a lead actor here. Zoe Saldaña doing even more solid work. Dave Bautista kind of launching him into the pop culture landscape as an actor to look at. And Bradley Cooper beginning the ascent of Bradley Cooper into this very, very well-respected artist who can do multiple things all at once and introduced all these characters that we are going to love forever, whether they come back in a Marvel movie or not, and we'll see what happens in Secret Wars. But I just love this movie, and it's almost a perfect movie. And I never think any film is fully perfect. This is as close as it gets. And James Gunn, and this is why people are excited for Superman, because if he can bring this kind of artistry to that Superman, I think people are going to be very, very happy with the end result. So that's how I kind of analyze this film right now at this moment in my life.
I think there are a lot of genuinely enjoyable Marvel movies that feel like Marvel movies. And you go like, here's another one. I want another one of those. And it's fun. And you enjoyed it. And that was good. And for me, there are 3 Marvel movies that feel like movies made by a director or directors. And one is Captain America and the Winter Soldier, that has its own feel, that it's its own thing. Another is Black Panther. And the third is Guardians of the Galaxy. This to me is the vision of an auteur. This isn't a mainstream vision. You know, this isn't like a corporation. A corporation cannot put together Guardians of the Galaxy. They can't do it. They can't be weird and wacky and peculiar and grumpy and all those things that Guardians is. That just doesn't come from committee. That comes from a singular director. And this is what he said over and over again, his collaboration with all these other weirdos, like his brother Sean, like Chris Pratt, like it's all of them exploring this stuff and being really fun about it. And so, and if you just want to have a totally fun ride, this is a totally fun ride. It's really, really funny. Arguably the funniest of all the Marvel movies, which have many funny moments, is really, really funny. But then it is also really, really heartfelt and really moving. Like by the time you get to We Are Groot, and by the time you get to Mom, Take My Hand, those 2 climactic moments pay off in this huge emotional way. And this is the big thing I was thinking too, because like you know, I wasn't in the best place recently, and I've been thinking a lot about our country, and I've been thinking a lot about where we are. And this is a movie. And I think one of the things that happens is we tend to judge people by their worst, what we see as their worst elements or their worst choices. And what Guardians of the Galaxy is about is don't judge them by that. Each one of these characters has done horrible things and probably killed a fair amount of people and been bad guys in lots of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And each one of them we are capable of still saving the world. And it's not because they become perfect. It's not because they resolve all their wackiness. They don't. They're never going to resolve. They're always going to be these characters. And yet we can love them for their potential for good, not condemn them for those things that are evil about them. And that to me is what really made watching this so great, was like going, oh, this is the attitude I want to have going forward, is how do we find ways to look past the negative qualities of people and celebrate what's great about them, because there are great things about them.
I agree. And it's only when they open their hearts to love, open their hearts to family, open their hearts to acceptance, that they're able to do the things that they do in this movie. So yeah, I 100% agree with you, Steve.
So that is what we think of Guardians of the Galaxy. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please visit us on our Facebook page. Do a search for the Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on X, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. We also get your comments on Spotify. If you're a Spotify person, those are really fun because you can comment episode by episode, which you can't on Apple Podcasts. But on Apple Podcasts, you can leave your reviews. You can also subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, where you get ad-free versions of the show and access to our Cine-Files shorts. You can get all of those things and a lot more at patreon.com/the Cine-Files, including access to our advisory board, asking questions like you heard so many of them in this episode. You can buy or stream Guardians of the Galaxy along with every other film we've ever reviewed at cinephiles.net. And you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how about you?
You can always reach me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. My YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, and my other podcasts, The Hot Mic and The Geek Buddies, that are out there for you all to enjoy as much as this one. Although this one, this one's pretty much loved. So there you go.
Well, and I think that's it for this week. We'll be back next time for another great film right here on the Cine-Files.